The Iranians were not going to attack because they know that if they attack first, they forfeit all leverage. Okay? They want to send their kids to these conflicts, but they're okay with sending yours. They don't have to worry about, am I going to be able to afford gas to go to work today? They're making a bunch of money talking about, yeah, America, yeah, we're destroying them. Woo, making a bunch of money on this. And then also, the other thing that's important is that don't forget that Donald Trump campaigned on no new wars. This is a new war. I don't care what anybody says. This is absolutely a new war. It doesn't benefit real Americans. It really doesn't. We have serious problems at home that we're not dealing with. So here's the thing, right? Like, it's easy to sit there and say, oh yeah, you know, we had 6 soldiers die, right, from the KC-135. But what they never show you is that this was actually a real person, right? Rest in peace to Alex Klinner. And this is why I'm anti-war, guys. Because we sit here, you know, from the comfort of our own homes, talking about this conflict, talking about this war, and we forget that there's real people on the other side fighting said war. So my thing is, I look at war as the absolute last resort that is needed from a defensive posture. That is the only time we should be engaging in war in 2026. Okay? It's absolutely to continue to wage war the way that we do for preemptive reasons. They were going to attack. No, they weren't. No, they weren't. The Iranians were not going to attack because they know that if they attack first, they forfeit all leverage. Okay? And we know that their second strike capability literally ran into their defensive and military strategies, the cornerstone of their military strategy, okay? It's literally the backbone of how they do things. So they were not going to attack first. They were not going to attack first. This is a country that has never invaded another country before. Since this regime has taken place, this evil regime that they talk about, has never invaded another country. Israel has, though. Israel's waged war against all their enemies, but they're our greatest ally. So again, when I say I am anti-war, I don't like war, it's because I understand that these casualties that they talk about, these KIAs, these are real people with real families, with real people that care and love them, real people that went to your high school, real people that might have went to college with you, real people that might have worked with you, real people that might have been a reserve only and then they got called in to do active duty. That's why. So when I see these idiots on X talking about, yeah, we're trying to find out, yeah, America, yeah, let's go. These people, a lot of the times, haven't served. Or if they do, they have ulterior motives. They don't serve anymore. They want to send their kids to these conflicts, but they're okay with sending yours. They don't have to worry about, am I going to be able to afford gas to go to work today? They're making a bunch of money talking about, yeah, America, yeah, we're destroying them. Woo, making a bunch of money on this. And then also, the other thing that's important is that don't forget that Donald Trump campaigned on no new wars. This is a new war. I don't care what anybody says. This is absolutely a new war. Now, I know that the administration is reluctant to call it a war. This is why Pete Hegseth won't give an answer, says, oh yeah, we're leaving it to the lawyers, etc. But this is a new war. We have casualties. We spent billions upon billions of dollars. And the casualties that we know, I guarantee they're more than that. And we know that something like 150 servicemen were significantly injured. You know what that means? They probably were maimed. That means that they probably had to go ahead and get amputations or they're not going to come back the same. So when I say the things that I say and I get brain dead arguing with me on X, the reason why I'm so passionate about this is because 20 years ago, right, when we invaded Iraq, 23 years ago to be exact, I didn't understand the ramifications of war, okay? I was pissed off that I couldn't go to a theme park in the summer of 2003. But fast forward 23 years later, from 2003 to 2026, and I'm a grown man at 36 years old, now I understand fully that it goes way beyond me not being able to go to a theme park when I was 13 years old. Now I understand that people are really dying. 13-year-olds might not have their dad now. People are not going to be able to afford their groceries. People are not going to be able to afford their gas. Meanwhile, we got these warmongering sitting there trying to fool you again. Well, luckily, this time around, we have alternative media. Luckily, this time around, we don't have to rely on mainstream media, which is where Louis Theroux comes from, by the way. We don't have to rely upon, deceptive journalists trying to put us out of agenda. We have alternative media where people don't have an agenda, where they can just be honest with you. I'm not paid by anybody. I'm not paid by the Republicans. I'm not paid by the Democrats. I'm not paid by any. Matter of fact, a lot of them don't like me because of the things that I say, because I call it like it is. And I'm here to tell you guys, this war is anyone that supports this war is and anyone that, is sitting there cheering on this war is a piece of that clearly doesn't understand the serious geopolitical ramifications that we're all going to have to pay for. These stupid MAGA that are sitting there cheering, saying like Iran is the biggest backer of terrorism and, they're a threat to America, whatever. They're backer of terrorism against Israel. They have issues with Israel. The only reason that we have issues with them is because of Israel. Okay? When are we going to figure out that intervention does not work in the Middle East? It didn't work in Sudan. It didn't work in Libya. It didn't work in Iraq. It's definitely not going to work in Iran because they can fight back, unlike all these other countries, because the Iranians have studied how we wage warfare and they prepared for it. They built everything underground. Despite Pete Hegseth telling you guys that we've taken out 90% of their ability to fight, that's a lie. That's a lie. So when I say the things that I say and people get heard or get mad at me on Twitter is because they know that war against Iran is an indefensible position. And Trump lied to us because he campaigned on not going to war. Because I understand, and smart people understand, that war only benefits a small percentage of people. The oligarchs, the defense contractors, the military-industrial complex. It doesn't benefit real Americans. It really doesn't. We have serious problems at home that we're not dealing with. Yeah, see, we got to start in here. PF Jarek says, Martin gets paid by pro-IRGC. Let's see what this word says. I'm about to roast your dumb, bro, because I love like you. PJ Farouk says, Myron gets paid by pro-IRGC networks. I get paid by pro-IRGC networks for telling the truth about Iran's capabilities. Did I not say that there's going to be a regional war if we attack them? Did I not say that they were going to close down the Strait of Hormuz? Did I not say and call out all the things that are happening right now? I called it back in June. Did I not tell you that all the was going to happen and is going to create an economic crisis for the rest of the world? Dumb. So enjoy the Shadow Realm, because you're stupid.
Time to send you to the Shadow Realm. The future is mine.
The only people that are promoting and encouraging this war are one of three people. And magatards, aka boomers. Those are the only three people really promoting this war. Anyone with half a brain understands that this war doesn't benefit America whatsoever. We get zero strategic benefit from this conflict. Oh, and did you guys also hear that now they're talking about anyone that wants to pass the Strait of Hormuz has to pay a Chinese yuan? Let me tell you how bad that is. For the idiots in here that don't understand how the world works, let me explain to you guys something. I'm going to explain to you guys something here that a lot of idiots don't want to talk about and why this is a big deal that they want to accept Chinese yuan. So let's go through this. Now, in order for you guys to understand the significance of, boats potentially having to do transactions in Chinese yuan across the Strait of Hormuz, you must understand the concept of the US dollar. Okay, let's go through this. Our hegemony, right, our power across the world is built on four foundations. Okay? Number one, reserve currency status. Number two, the petrodollar. Number three, SWIFT. And then most importantly, number four, our military strength. Okay? These are the four pillars of American power that make us a world superpower. Okay? And at one point made us the unipolar power, but now it's a multipolar world. So let's go ahead for the purpose of this conversation. We're going to talk more about the dollar. Okay? Now, back in the 1970s, Nixon cut a very important deal where he basically said, hey, look, Saudi Arabia and these Gulf countries, we want you guys to do your oil transactions in US dollars. Okay? Why? Because if every country does all their transactions in US dollars, this creates a demand for the US dollar. If there's a demand on the US dollar, basically the US becomes the world's reserve currency. This is what's informally known as the petrodollar. Okay? Now, this went ahead and continued to bleed over into commodities. So all foreign transactions, when countries deal with each other, for the most part, are done in US dollars. Okay? So oil and commodities are typically traded in US dollars. Now, here's the problem with this. Many countries realized with the United States having this power, their currency, right, is very strong. When your currency is strong, what does that allow you to do? Well, it allows you to print money ad nauseum with almost no consequence. Okay? Kind of like we do right now. So when you are the world's reserve currency, you can just print money however much you want. Okay? And we don't have to deal with the consequences of inflation. So for example, something like 50% of the world's current money in use, okay, was printed during the COVID era. That's insane. Any other country would have serious inflation issues. But since we're the world's reserve currency, we are able to forego a lot of these consequences that would otherwise come and hit us economically, right? So when countries challenge our ability to be the reserve currency, guess what happens? We destroy those countries. Okay? Because America is built upon, once again, those four pillars that I mentioned. Reserve currency status, petrodollar, U.S. military power, and SWIFT. Now, another way that we punish other countries for not doing what they're supposed to do is we kick them off of SWIFT. This is what we did with the Russians. When Russia invaded Ukraine, one of the first things we did was sanction them and then kick them off of SWIFT. So now we made it very difficult for them to do transactions because the entire world global system, the global financial system, is pretty much run through SWIFT. Okay? So what ended up happening was we were able to hurt the Russians financially to a degree. Now, here's the problem though, okay? The Russians were prepared for this. Back in 2014, when the Russians invaded Crimea, because just so you guys know, this war with Ukraine did not start in 2022. That's for the smooth brain think that the war started in 2022. The war really started back in 2014, okay? After the Maidan revolution, which, by the way, we were involved in that, by the way, as well, okay? Well, we came in and we overthrew the pro-Russian government, etc., and put Zelensky in. That's a whole other conversation. If you guys want more detail on that, watch my interview that I did with Jackson Hinkle. We went real deep into that. But for the purpose of this conversation, I'm going to talk more about the 2022 conflict, the special military operation, which, by the way, we did the same exact thing with Iran, FYI. Right? Isn't it funny how those shoes on the other foot now? But anyway, back to what I was saying. When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, or excuse me, in 2014, we heavily sanctioned them. They had a whole bunch of problems with SWIFT, everything else like that. So when 2022 came, they basically made their country recession-proof and inflation-proof and American hegemony-proof. What do I mean by this? They bought a bunch of gold from the Sudanese. They had Hemeti, literally, in Moscow the day they invaded, bringing over a bunch of gold. They had their financial system prepared for it. They knew they were going to get kicked off SWIFT. They knew that they were going to be sanctioned. So they started making a bunch of different Russian brands that copy American brands. Like, for example, there's no McDonald's in Russia, but they have damn near the same thing. They just got rid of the McDonald's, made it like, you know, McRussell's, and they served the same right? And then Russia ended up becoming one of the strongest economies in the world. Okay, they're like in the top 5, top 10 economies in the world, despite the fact that we have them sanctioned. Trump realized this. So the Russians were beating the out of the Ukrainians, even though we're giving them all the support, and they're not really bleeding from the sanctions. If anything, their economy has gone stronger, okay? So he's like, damn, we're putting all this money into a war that we're not even winning. The Russians are becoming stronger. What the are we doing? So he wanted to cut a deal with Putin because Trump, intelligently enough, respects power. That's one thing about Donald Trump. He respects power. He respects Kim Jong-un and he respects Putin. That's why they laugh at him and say that he's a dictator lover. Well, Trump is intelligent enough to understand that if they can destroy us, you need to make peace with them. He's smart enough in that regard, right? So anyway, why am I telling you all this? I'm telling you all this because Russia showed that you can get around the US dollar and you can get around the American trade system of SWIFT, right? The Iranians also found ways to get around the sanctions, basically selling oil on black markets, selling it at a discounted rate to the Chinese, etc. Using the UAE, interestingly enough, to launder illicit funds through their banks that find their way back to Tehran. So the Iranians have been very intelligent and savvy in getting around these sanctions. But let's go ahead and continue on with what we were discussing before with, you know, this war. Oh, and then another thing too, also with the Russian angle that I want to say that's interesting. We sanctioned the out of Russia, right? People couldn't go ahead and buy Russian gas and oil. Guess what people are doing now? They're buying Russian gas and oil. The whole purpose of the tariffs, etc., was to kind of weaken our adversaries and punish those that do trade with our enemies or adversaries. And now look, we're giving countries waivers to buy Russian gas and oil. Why? Because 20% of the world's oil is holed up in the Strait of Hormuz, and then 20% of the world's gas is not being made in Qatar. Now let's go back to the Chinese yuan, right? Why this is bad. As you guys know, the United States, right, our power comes from military, SWIFT, and reserve currency status, right, in the petrodollar. Now, if the Iranians say, look, you could come through the Strait of Hormuz, but you have to do all your transactions in yuan, guess what that does? That weakens the power of the US dollar, okay? Let me tell y'all something that no one wants to admit, but I'm going to tell you guys right now, okay? Because it's very important that you guys understand this. De-dollarization of the world is the United States' biggest fear. I'm going to say that again. De-dollarization of the US dollar is one of the biggest fears of our government. Why? Because our power stems from our ability to print money with no consequence. And that is predated on the fact that we are the reserve currency. As long as there is a need for US dollars all across the world, we can keep printing money. But if there is not a need for the US dollar, people start using yuan, people start using rubles, BRICS, etc. That's a problem, okay? And again, this is why I tell you guys that diplomacy is so important. You look at a country like the United States, which wages war all across the Middle East, spending trillions of dollars, putting us into debt. What has China been doing all this time? China's been building, making relationships, giving infrastructure to poor countries, creating all types of pragmatic alliances. They're challenging the hegemony of our currency. What the do you guys think BRICS is? BRICS is a response to the US dollar's dominance because they are tired of the United States waging financial warfare on them via the dollar. So if they dollarize the United States, guess what happens? We lose a lot of international leverage. Now, a lot of you guys, right, saw Venezuela fall. We went in there, we took Maduro, kidnapped him. Everyone's like, yeah, woo, this is awesome. What did I tell you guys when that happened? I said, look, in the short term, we're going to get some benefits, but in the long term, this is going to hurt us. Why? Because I knew that if they went ahead and kidnapped Maduro, this is going to increase Chinese resolve to protect Iran or to assist them. Same with the Russians. because the Russians and the Chinese have a vested interest in ensuring that Iran does not become a vassal state for Israel, which will then be a vassal state for the United States. Because all that cheap oil that the Chinese enjoy from the Iranians, that's out the window.
Bombakat!
Keep in mind, they lost Venezuela's cheap oil.
Bombakat!
They don't want to lose the Iranians' cheap oil as well. So now, the Iranians, right, control a vital economic energy choke point. The United States cannot stop them. Despite the fact that Donald Trump talks all this tough shit, they can't stop them. You want to know why? Because here's the reality. These ships cannot cross the Strait of Hormuz because they're not going to be insured. These are freighter ships carrying millions of barrels of oil, okay? They don't want to get hit with a goddamn drone. They really don't. Okay, that's no bueno. That's bad for business. So insurance rates have tripled. And no captain is going to sail with all that oil without insurance. So they're just sitting there. And only a few vessels have been able to make it through, I think something like 70. Guys, that's a 94% drop-off of the amount of ships that should be going through there. Okay? 20% of the world's oil goes through that strait. So now, if the Iranians say, oh, you guys can go through, but you got to use Chinese yuan. Guess what that does for the US dollar? This is very real, and it's very bad. And most Americans don't understand this shit. So when these idiots are sitting there saying, America, yeah, let's keep blowing them up, we kidnap Maduro, let's go, they don't understand that this creates a geopolitical domino effect that is not good. Who the are we to sit there and say, hey, Putin, you can't launch a special military operation into Ukraine and protect your national security? Meanwhile, fast forward years later, because Putin invaded in February of 2022, 4 years later, February 28th, what are we doing? Bombed the out of Tehran. Did the same exact. The hypocrisy is wild. And this is why the international community is slowly losing faith and respect for the United States. I'm telling you guys what everyone else is too stupid to tell you. These magatards will never tell you this. These will never tell you this. Okay? People don't trust the United States. Henry Kissinger said it himself. It's dangerous to be an ally of the United States, but it's fatal to be an ally. If you're an enemy of the United States, it's dangerous. If you're an ally, it's fatal. So again, I'm telling y'all, bro. I'm telling you guys. This is not good. The fact that the Iranians have shut down the Strait of Hormuz and we can't stop them, because again, none of these ships want to sail without insurance. All they have to do is create the implication that they can't get through. Also, like I predicted, the Iranians have put mines all across the seafloor.